In this lesson, we'll be talking about box shadow. Go ahead and open up border2.html in your working files folder. Now, adding a shadow on this box is literally as easy as saying box shadow. Now, what about the properties that go inside? Well, we've got 4 properties. If I say 2 pixels, 2 pixels, 5 pixels, RGBA 000 0.5. Now, RGBA is a different color type that's new with CSS3. If you don't know about that, you can go back to the lesson on that. This is the horizontal offset, and this is the vertical offset for the box shadow. So if you set those to 0, the box shadow will be immediately behind this element, not offset to the side. 5 pixels here, this is the blurriness. And this here is the color. And you'll notice I used RGBA, which has some alpha. Otherwise, drop shadows tend to look quite hideous. If I refresh, sure enough, I now have a nice drop shadow on my element. Now, if I set this to an opacity of 1, you can see how hideous it looks. Especially if we bring this, say, to an offset of 4, and the blurriness to an offset of 10. It just looks really heavy-handed. So again, I prefer 0.4, roughly. Nice and subtle. So that's simply how you make a shadow on a box. As you can see, it works very well with border radius. It understands that the corner is round. But as it turns out, there are other interesting things that you can do with box shadow. Let me show you an example. I'm going to add a new element down here in the HTML, div class of ball. Now I'm going to target this ball and I'll give it a width of 20 pixels. Same thing with height. And I'll give it a background color of red. Lastly, we'll use our newly learned border radius. If I set it to 50%, now I have a ball. So I can add a shadow to that ball, but you can actually use box shadow for all sorts of other things. For example, you can say box shadow 0, 0, 10 pixels, black. And now you have a glow. If you had a dark background, you could give it a white glow. I could even give it an orange glow for a very slight, hot, glowing sensation. That might look especially good if it was up against a blue sky or something. It might look like the sun. Now here's another example. If I say box shadow 0, 0, 0, blue, this box shadow will be immediately behind this element and not visible. But what if I give it a horizontal offset? Now that shadow actually looks like a separate element, at least visually. So that can be a really fun way of creating fake elements. Remember, this doesn't require any changes to the HTML. Once you have an element and you want to duplicate it somehow, maybe duplicate the shape, all you have to do is give it a box shadow, but make that box shadow very sharp, have no blurriness whatsoever. Now, putting these 2 box shadow properties right next to each other raises an interesting question. Can you have multiple box shadows? I'm going to change this box shadow to red so it's more visible. Well, it turns out if you put them one right after the other, just like this, the bottom one will be the one that wins. But if you instead say box shadow 0, 0, 10 pixels red, comma, 100 pixels 0, 0 blue, now the computer knows, oh, the box shadow property has the following value. What we were doing before is we were saying, give it a red box shadow, and then forget that, give it a blue box shadow. But this allows us to give it multiple box shadows. Now we have a red one, and we have the blue one. Now there's one other thing that I want to show you. I'm going to take this box shadow up here, copy it, I'm going to comment out this one. Now I want to make this box shadow happen on the inside of the element, and in fact that's quite possible. All you have to do is say inset. Now you'll notice the box shadow is on the inside. It's along the top and left instead of the bottom and right, but we can correct that very easily by setting this to -4 pixels, -4 pixels. So those are just a couple of the interesting things that you can do with box shadows. And yes, you can indeed have an outer and an inner shadow. Just like before, put a comma there. Now we've got an outer shadow and an inner shadow.